Okay, so just while I'm waiting for someone to join the stream, I just want to talk a little about the stream. So basically, oh, just give me 1 second now. I just have to make sure there's no audio feedback here. Okay. So if all goes to plan, my girlfriend should be joining us shortly. But in terms of what today's topic is, the purpose behind today's stream is to kind of look at the Old Testament and to basically look at where Jesus comes up, right, as far as the pre-incarnate Christ is concerned. Now, what does that mean? What do we mean by pre-incarnate Christ? It's a very difficult kind of theological point to make, but when we speak of Jesus of Nazareth, so Jesus of Nazareth did not eternally exist, okay? Jesus of Nazareth is the Son, the eternal Son, or the eternal Logos of God taking on flesh. And then you have the birth of Jesus of Nazareth, who is the union between both God and man, okay? That's what Jesus of Nazareth symbolizes, right? The union between God and man. But Jesus of Nazareth, as I said, he did not eternally exist. He came into existence at a point in history, which is when God, through the eternal person of the Son, took flesh upon himself and became a man. And then as a consequence of that, you have the birth of Jesus of Nazareth, who is, as we would say, from a theological perspective, you have what's going on there called the hypostatic union, which is that he was fully divine whilst also he was fully human whilst remaining fully divine, right? And that's basically what Jesus of Nazareth symbolizes. Now, the question, so when I use Jesus in the Old Testament, I'm obviously referring to the Son, since there was no Jesus of Nazareth in the Old Testament. You just had the eternal Son who was seated at the right hand of the Father before the foundation of the world. So we're going to look at instances where Jesus crops up in the Old Testament, and the reason for this is because basically Jesus makes a number of profound statements throughout the Gospel, which I have up, which we'll look at when I start sharing my screen a little later. But he makes a number of profound statements, which I would say are just clear statements of his own pre-existence. There's one other verse. I just want to make sure I have it ready. It's this one. Okay. So yeah. And by the way, this is something that the gospel authors, all four of them, consistently testify to. So the Muslim argument, for example, that Jesus was merely just a prophet and claimed to be only a prophet, claimed to be a Muslim, is totally false for a number of reasons, as we'll see. Because it's unanimously accepted, by the way, within scholarship, even within critical scholarship, that the four gospel writers view Jesus as Yahweh in some sense. They view him as the eternal God in some sense. Bart Ehrman even pointed this out. He pointed it out in his interview with Muhammad Hijab, which you can watch, by the way, which was one of his most recent interviews. But within that interview, he said, yeah, the four gospel writers all believe Jesus is God in some sense, okay? So that's well attested to within scholarship. And if you go to critical commentaries written by Greek experts on the Gospels, and you look at the different passages throughout, in terms of how they commentate on those passages, they all unanimously agree that the four Gospel writers are deifying Jesus in some shape or form, whether it's by taking Old Testament prophecies that apply solely to Yahweh and then applying them to Jesus. In other words, in their head, the name Yahweh is interchangeable with Jesus. That's like saying the name Allah is interchangeable with my name, Adam. If I was to do that to myself, I would be deifying myself, which is what the authors do with Jesus consistently. Now, your only workaround as a Muslim in that particular instance would be just to sit there and say, well, these are interpolations, right? That this is the form of corruption that we attest to as far as biblical scriptures are concerned. which is that these authors basically corrupted the words of Christ. Fine, if that's your argument, fine. But don't sit there and say nowhere in the Gospels does Jesus call himself God. Yes, in Jesus' own words, in a number of places, he refers to himself as God, and he commits a gross form of shirk. One primary example I would often use, which we're going to see a little later, is when Jesus refers to himself consistently as the Son of Man from Daniel chapter 7. This comes from ignorance, but the ignorant kind of Islamic argument to try and work around this is, well, wait a minute, doesn't the interpretation of that chapter, let's just say, indicate that the Son of Man is in fact just a symbol for the nation of Israel? Yeah, you can view it in that way. That's how some of the Jews did, but sadly not all of them did. There were Jews at the time of Jesus and before the time of Jesus, for example, the book of Enoch, 2nd Esdras, so on and so forth, where the Son of Man figure is interpreted as a singular messianic Davidic figure who was the representative for the nation of Israel. So they viewed him as an individual figure, a cosmic judge that would come at the end of time to judge the living and the dead. That was also an interpretation that existed not just at the time of Jesus, but before the time of Jesus. In other words, that passage from Daniel chapter 7 need not be interpreted in that one way. It can be interpreted as a singular figure, or if you go along the kind of the Jewish perspective on it, the tendency is to lean towards the figure symbolizing the nation of Israel. Now, a lot of the time, especially with the midrash that was produced on these particular chapters, Jews have to find a way to work around certain passages, which for them indicate that God is not strictly Unitarian in nature, right? That God is in fact a plurality of persons, but one God by nature, which we'll see later on when we get to Genesis 19, for example. But like, this is just something to keep in mind. So Son of Man, in Jesus' own words, whenever he uses a term, he's referring to it as a singular figure. So Jesus in his head does not have the nation of Israel as being that Son of Man figure from Daniel. In his head, that Son of Man figure from Daniel is him, and it's a singular cosmic judge who will come at the end of time to judge the living and the dead. Now, if I was to ask you as a Muslim, who in the end of time is going to come on the clouds of heaven with the angels and judge the entire world as part of God's final judgment? Who's going to carry out God's final judgment upon the entire world in terms of deciding who gets to go to heaven and who goes to hell? Who has that authority according to the Quran? And you would tell me Allah. Well, according to Jesus, he has that authority. Now, that's, if I was to claim that authority for myself, I'd be committing shirk, okay? Because I'd be associating with Allah, a partner, which would be myself, which is what Jesus does consistently in a number of places. So that's clearly testified to within the gospel. And not only that, you have a number of instances, for example, like one of them is very disturbing. Like if you want to go to Matthew chapter 12, Jesus calls himself, he makes two profound claims in that statement, in that chapter. The first is that he says, in accordance with his own words, he says something greater than the temple is here, okay? Now, just give me 1 second, guys. I just want to... He first says something greater than the temple is here, right? This is in Matthew chapter 12. Now, the question is, what does the temple symbolize? Temple symbolizes the place of worship, okay? What's greater than the place of worship? Well, it would have to be the object of worship. In other words, you're claiming to be the object of worship. Okay, it's almost like if Jesus said something greater than the mosque is here. How would you interpret that? If I was to walk, let's say, to the Kaaba or something, and I would say something greater than the Kaaba is here, and referring to myself as being that thing that's greater, how would you interpret that? Exactly, that's a divine claim. On top of that, he then proceeds then after that to refer to himself as being the Lord of the Sabbath. Okay, again, a very, very disturbing claim, because that claim in and of itself, and by the way, he says the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath, referring to himself. Again, that cosmic judge claim. In other words, his authority and his teaching is the authority and teaching of God himself, because he is God himself, right? Meaning he is the Lord over everything, right? Now, if I claimed right now to be the Lord over everything within creation, what would I be claiming about myself? Who am I claiming, How am I referring to myself? Who am I claiming myself to be? Okay. So, that's clearly a divine claim. And as I said, he makes that, he makes these sort of claims consistently about himself. So the first example I want us to look at is we're going to go to Matthew chapter 17, okay? And we're going to look at the transfiguration briefly, because this particular passage is very, very profound. So let me just share my screen. Present. I hope the audio is okay for those who are watching. Okay.
Hi.
Hi, babe. How are you doing?
I'm good.
I'm good. Okay, we're just moving on to, we're going to start with Matthew chapter 17.
What?
We're going to start with Matthew 17, okay?
Give me 1 second, because I'm putting the stand down.
Okay.
1 minute.
Yeah, no worries, babe. Let me just share my...
Oh. Share with her.
I'm just going to share my screen, babe. Matthew 17, where is it? Okay, can you see Matthew 17?
Yeah, I can see, but I can also take my Bible.
Okay.
And also remember that this is YouTube. Okay.
yeah, no, I know. Okay, so do you want to read, or will I read the first couple of verses of this?
What? Which one? Matthew, you said?
Yeah, verses, let's say 1 to 9. Would you read
Matthew
those?
17, 1 to
Yeah.
9.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, the phone just beeped. Okay. Shall I?
Yeah, go ahead.
After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and his brother John and led them up on a high mountain by themselves. He was transfigured in front of them, and his face shone like the sun. His clothes became as white as the light. Suddenly, Moses and Elijah, appeared to them, talking with him. Then Peter said to Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you want, I will set up 3 shelters here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. While he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud covered them, and a voice from the cloud said, This is my beloved son, with whom I'm well pleased. Listen to him. When the disciples heard this, they fell face down and were terrified. Shall I keep going?
Keep going to 9, babe.
Until 9, yeah. Okay, and Jesus came up, touched them, and say, Get up, don't be afraid. When they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus alone. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus commanded them not to tell anyone about the vision until the Son of Man is raised from the dead.
Yeah. So what are you getting from that roughly?
So, do you want like a general talking, or do you want like a deep talking?
We can do it in a relaxed way. So general, but also try and hone in on the stuff that like you and I've been going through in the Old Testament, which we're going to get to in a second. But
So,
in terms of what Jesus is revealing about himself here, what is he revealing about himself to us?
first of all, we wouldn't say him revealing, because it wasn't himself that was just like, oh, I'm gonna show them off, whatever.
Yeah.
It was just like at this moment, this specific moment that happened.
Yeah.
And also we can, like, the fact that they say that he transfigured and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes were like white, as white as the light.
Yeah.
That says a lot. That's many times, like when we were reading the word, we also saw that that's one of the I don't know how to say it. That's could be one of the reason, like no one ever seen God like face to face,
Yeah.
because of the brightness of his face. We
Uh-huh.
wouldn't be able even to, to stand in front of him
Yeah.
because of that. That was one of them. And then when he is talking about Moses and Elijah, we are talking about Moses here represent the law. Like
Mm-hmm.
I have them here, so like that's why I was asking you
Yeah.
deep
Yeah.
or just like.
Yeah.
And then Elijah represent the prophets
Mm-hmm.
that appear to them like in that moment. And then also, so a question that I always had, I was just like, how the three specific guy that Jesus selected, Peter, James, and his brother John, how
Mm-hmm.
did they know that was Moses and Elijah there?
Yeah.
That's a question that I have. How did they know?
Well, that's a really good question. So it says, verse 4, right? And Peter said to Jesus, Lord, is it good that we are here if we wish? I make 3 tents here, one for you, and one for Moses, and one for Elijah.
Yeah.
Now, before that, we're told that, and behold, there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with them. My assumption is that when they were having the conversation, because they're okay, so Jesus is talking with Moses and Elijah before they say this, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
My assumption is based off the conversation, because you're totally right, right? If
mm-hmm.
Moses was to appear, I wouldn't recognize Moses because I don't know what he looks like. Same with Elijah, right? I wouldn't know what he looks like. But I'm assuming that if Jesus was talking to Moses and Elijah before they made that comment, they were probably listening to the conversation and they could hear Jesus maybe say, oh, Moses, oh, Elijah, and they could hear them talking to each other. And they got from that was Moses and that was Elijah. That would be my assumption.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also here, like, because this is the New Testament, right?
Yeah.
We also have like an insight of what uh God give the confirmation that Jesus is actually his son, his beloved son.
Yeah.
It's not Elijah or or Moses who say that, but
Yeah.
it's God that say that. And the reason why I am saying that is God is because also in the Old Testament we knew that the when Israel were they were in the when Israel were in the wilderness,
Yeah.
yeah, they
Yeah.
always had a cloud, like a broad cloud that was following them, like during the day, and a pillar of fire during the
Uh-huh.
night. So
Uh-huh.
this one, which was the presence of God with them.
Yeah.
So the fact that they had the same, like the same cloud covering them,
Yeah.
my assume, like I would say that was God.
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
also and also in the Old Testament something like that happened when when God wanted to talk with Israel, and he went he used the cloud, and
Yeah.
then Israel said that they didn't wanted to talk to God because they were scared.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, but I think it
Yeah.
was
Yeah. Yeah.
in Exodus or something.
Yeah. It's back in Exodus. Yeah.
Yeah. And so my assumption here is God again. And then another confirmation is that they fell down on their face because
Uh-huh.
they were terrified. That's the same reaction that Israel had when
Yeah.
God was talking to them, and then they say, "You better talk to us through Moses, lest we die."
Yeah.
So that's the same indication to say that this one was God talking.
Yeah. Yeah.
And um and then also and then also another thing, like we're gonna go a little bit like separated from what is it on a high mountain again.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. Well,
don't
it's
like this one I want you to say that, because probably if I say that, people then will be like, oh, she does not understand what she's talking about and whatever
No,
other kind of
tell
stuff.
me what you think. Tell me what you think, babe.
Because you remember many time when Moses has to like talk with God, he will go to an high mountain.
Yeah.
He will, I think it was in Mount Sinai,
Mount
right?
Sinai. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He will always go in at the mountain to talk with God. He won't like be down or whatever. And
Yeah.
here we can also see the same exact position where they went. They were not like in a flat land, they were like in a mountain. So my assumption here is just like they knew each other from the Old Testament,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because it must be like an habit for them to be talking, because it wasn't something like the way this one appeared is not like one of them is saying, "Oh, I don't know you," or "I don't know what you are."
Yeah. I always say
What
that. I always say that when we go through this, because like if you didn't know someone and they just resurrected you out of nowhere, you'd look at them like, "Who the hell are you? Like, what's? Why am I here? What's going on?" They don't do
exactly?
that. They
So
just have a conversation like they're buddies, basically.
exactly. So that's my assumption. It was just like a Moses and Jesus. They knew each other as well as the prophets,
Yeah.
and then also in the Old Testament, we know that Moses used to talk face to face to God, right?
Yeah.
However, I'm assuming he wasn't God,
Yeah.
because Jesus said in the New Testament, no one saw the Father. Like it wasn't okay. When I say it wasn't God, it wasn't God the Father,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because Jesus said, no one ever saw the Father except for me. Because if you have seen me, then you have seen the Father,
Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah.
what he said. So my assumption is just like Moses. Hello, sorry.
Is Adam coming here?
No, I'm having a live now. Can I just? Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay, babe. Keep going.
We are you too. Okay. What was I saying? So my assumption is just like Moses and Jesus already met each other in the past.
Yeah.
So there is no, for me, there is no doubt, because
Mm-hmm.
otherwise the reaction was gonna be like different.
Yep.
I know that Jesus is God and he's been like outside of the time and whatever other things, but for Moses to be there talking with him, I'm not even saying Jesus. Let's say Moses
Yeah.
to be there talking with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
That's meaning you already encountered him like
Yeah.
in the past.
Yeah.
You understand?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's one point for me. And then I also love how Jesus showed compassion to them.
Yeah.
But you know when they were terrified and they fell face down,
Yeah.
he just showed them like compassion, because he just first of all touched them, and then he was just like, get up, don't be afraid.
Yeah.
So, and then verse 8 said, when they look up, they saw no one except Jesus alone. Like if we want to stop in this sentence as well, is it just like only Jesus can save? Like no law can save you, no prophecy can save you, no prophet can save you. Him
Yeah.
alone can save you, because at the end, is the application of the law and the prophecy together. Because
Yeah.
when they lift up their eyes again to look around, who they saw? They only saw Jesus,
Yeah.
which means that we have life only through Jesus. We don't have any other life outside, not through prophecy, not through laws, because we are not able to apply the law.
Yeah.
I could not. I don't know other people, but for myself, I know I would not be able to apply the totality of the law.
Yeah.
And then also I have a question here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because my Bible, I don't know what your Bible say, or I don't know what that scripture say.
So this one is this is the ESV.
When you say the vision, why does he use the term vision according to you? What do you think?
Well, because they've seen something that's revelatory, right? They've seen effectively a manifestation of God's glory, right? Which is a glimpse or a vision into, I guess in some sense it's who God is, right? Who God is revealing Himself to be, right? And that's a visionary experience. So I think that that's what he's talking about, because this is something that's unique in terms of what they're seeing and what they're experiencing. So a vision generally is something that, Morel, that you would see, right? But no one else would see it, right? So it's something that was specifically given to you. But what does he tell them? Tell no one the vision until the Son of Man is raised from the dead, right? So what they've just witnessed and seen, they're not to report it until after he has been resurrected. Because for this, at least for right now, it wouldn't make sense to the people if they were to hear this vision. Because remember, how many times does Jesus prophesize about his resurrection? And in the moment, they're like, we don't get it. Like, what are you talking about? So I think that's what he's talking about, babe.
Okay.
Do you have anything else?
No. So far, no. What
Okay.
else do you want to add?
You basically nailed every point. Yeah, like the point with, you remember, Moses on one side, Elijah on the other. So the way Matthew sets up his gospel in chapter 5, verse 17, he says that Jesus says, I have come to fulfill the law and the prophets, which is what this vision in some sense is showing, right? It's showing that Jesus is the fulfillment of the law and the prophets. Now the question is by Jesus being the fulfillment or the totality of what the prophets were prophesying about and what the law was indicating as far as God's moral and perfect standard is concerned, what does that tell us about Jesus? If he's the fulfillment of all of that, who does that make Jesus, right? Now, for us, the understanding or the implication is quite obvious. He's God himself, right? He's the Word of God. He's God's self. How would you call it? He's God's revelation, self-disclosed within a person, right? Which is the Son, right? Which is the fullness of God's revelation, the fullness of God's truth, the fulfillment of everything, right? Is found in him because of who he is, right? As the true Son of the Father, right? The true divine Son of the Father. That's kind of what Matthew is clearly getting at. And then on top of that, you brought up the thing with Moses, which is very good and important. And as you rightfully said, right? This high mountain, what is it symbolizing? Mount Sinai, right? Very and not only that, you brought up the thing with the overshadowing thing as well. Again, going back to Exodus. So Matthew is clearly pulling all this imagery from Exodus and then applying it to Jesus, when all the stuff he's applying to Jesus is in the New Testament is referring strictly to God himself. So in other words, what Matthew is showing us is that Jesus is God himself, right? This is Matthew's point. Because what does transfigure mean? Transfigure means there's a change in his appearance, right? So in other words, his appearance, it takes his, so basically, his appearance is veiled, right? As a man, right? As the God man, right? Because if Jesus was to showcase his natural appearance, he'd just be going around blinding everybody, because it would just be glorious light. Everyone would just be bowing down, worshiping him. But if he was doing that, then he couldn't function as the Messiah, because he needed to get stuff done to fulfill God's plan. But here we finally get a glimpse of his true appearance, which is one of pure light, purity, right? Which is all symbolic of who God is, right? So his face shining like the sun. If we go to Exodus 34, because remember we did this with Moses. Let's go to Exodus 34 quickly and connect it.
Is it
with
34 or 33?
I think it's 34. It could be 33. Let me just double check. Share screen. 34. Just let me know if it's 33 if I have it wrong.
I think the fact that Moses went on the mountain and then he came back and his face was shining.
Yeah, it's 34:29.
34.
Well, yeah, 29. So I'll just quickly read these verses, and you can tell me what you think. Now, this is in conjunction with Matthew 17, right? When Moses came down from Mount Sinai, oh, excuse me.
Bless you.
When Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hand, he came down from the mountain. Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone because he had been talking with God. Aaron and all the people of Israel saw Moses, and behold, the skin of his face shone, and they were afraid to come near him. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So his face is shining as he's coming down, right? But the justification that's given here for Moses' face shining is that it's because he's reflecting what he'd seen. So the one with whom he had been speaking on Mount Sinai, that's what he's reflecting. He's reflecting the glory of that one that he'd seen, right? That's what they're seeing. Now, Matthew 17 tells us what? It just tells us that that's Jesus' natural appearance.
Mm-hmm.
If that's Jesus' natural appearance, then the next question is, who did Moses speak with on Mount Sinai?
Mm-hmm.
And whose
Jesus.
glory was, Jesus, right? And then whose glory was Moses reflecting when he came down? He was reflecting the glory of Christ, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the one whom he had encountered on Mount Sinai. I don't know if that makes sense, babe, does it?
Yes, it does make sense.
Okay. We move on to the next one then?
Yep.
Okay. Again, this is just for people to know. The reason we're doing this is because we're just showing you, where Jesus comes up in the Old Testament, where the different stuff comes. Okay. Let me just X that down. And the next one we're going to go to John chapter 8.
John 8?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So we're going to do... okay, we're going to do a couple of verses and connect them.
Mm-hmm.
So the first verse we're going to do is, this is John chapter 8, if you can do for me, verses 39. Actually, let's just do verse 39.
Just 39?
Yeah.
Our father is Abraham, they reply. If you were Abraham's children, Jesus told them, you would do what Abraham did. But now you are trying to kill me, a man who has told you the truth that I heard from God. Abraham did not do this. You are doing... Oh, so sorry. Oh, you say 39.
Just 39 for the moment. So
Sorry.
So
So
what?
it said, our father is Abraham, they replied. If you were Abraham's children, Jesus told them, you would do what Abraham did.
Yeah. Now, what are you understanding? Like, what's the point Jesus is making to them?
I'm not sure that's what I understand here.
So the they in this is the Pharisees and the scribes or whatever.
Is it the Pharisees or the Hebrews?
If I'm not mistaken, I think it's the Pharisees and the scribes.
The Pharisees, okay.
Yeah.
When he say, if you were Abraham's children, you will be doing what Abraham did.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I think Abraham was Abraham did not have the law, so we cannot say that Abraham was following the law. But Abraham had a relationship with God, so that's mean.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's the point, but for
so
how we know it,
connect it with verse 40. So read verse 40 as well and connect it, because that's the answer.
But now you are trying to kill me, a man who has told you the truth that I heard from God. Abraham didn't do this.
Okay. So what did Abraham not do?
Didn't tell them the truth.
So read 40 again. Start slowly with the start and read the start bit and then connect it with the end bit.
So 31 to 39.
40. No, so let's go with 40. So let's read the start bit. So what does he tell them? But now you what?
You are trying to kill me.
Okay, a man who has,
Told you the truth that I heard from God.
and Abraham didn't what?
Didn't do this.
Okay, so now what did Abraham not do according to that verse?
That's what I said. He didn't tell them the truth that he heard from God.
Yeah, but they're seeking to kill him. So in other words, Abraham didn't seek to kill him.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, here's the next question, right? This is the really like mind-blowing one,
Where's
right?
I need to take a pen or something because
That's cool though, right?
I
It's
mean
a little subtle one, but do you see what he's saying? It's like, you guys seek to kill me. Abraham didn't do that.
I need to go and take a pen. I'll be back. My stomach is just not good. I'm not feeling well. I'm back.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
So, now what's he saying to them basically? Abraham didn't do what?
Trying to kill him.
Mm-hmm. Now, if Abraham didn't try to kill Jesus, what would that mean?
Oh, that's mean that he saw him.
Exactly. That's Jesus's point. And then that leads us on to the next couple of verses where he says, before Abraham was, I am. So when we go to, now this will make sense of the next few verses, okay? So if you read verse 52, please, to 58. 52 to 58, please, babe.
Then the Jewish said, now we know you have a demon. You know you have a demon. Abraham died, and so did the prophets. You say, if anyone keep my word, he will never taste death.
Yeah. Yep.
Shall I keep going?
Yep, 52 to 58, please.
58. Are you greater than our father Abraham, who died, and the prophets died? Who do you claim to be? If I glorify myself, Jesus answered, my glory is nothing. My Father, about whom you said is our God, he is the one who glorifies me. You do not know him, but I know him. If I were to say I don't know him, I would be a liar like you, but I do know him and keep his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day. To see my day. He saw it and was glad.
Mm-hmm.
The Jew replied, you aren't 50 years old yet, and you have seen Abraham?
Yeah.
Jesus said to them, truly I tell you, before Abraham was, I am.
Mm-hmm. Or I am that I am, right?
Mhm.
Now, so the context is you just saw from the verses before this, right? That one verse, or those two verses, 39 and 40, right? You guys seek to kill me. Abraham didn't do this, right? And as the point there being that Abraham encountered Jesus, and when he encountered Jesus, what was his reaction? He accepted him. He didn't reject him or seek to kill him. He just received him for who he was.
Mhm.
And then when you read verse 56 and 57 in particular, what are you getting from that?
That he saw him, yeah, because he said that he saw my when Abraham, your father Abraham rejoiced to see my days. He saw it and he was glad.
Mm-hmm. And then the
And then
Jews
they
respond.
repeat. Okay.
So what? How did the Jews respond then?
They say you're not 50 years old yet, and
Yeah.
you have seen Abraham.
Mm-hmm. And then Jesus responds with,
Truly I tell you, before Abraham was, I am.
So
Yeah.
what's the overarching point here?
Okay, like I want to make 2 points. As I
Yeah.
said before, Abraham saw Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Because they said it as well. Like from the reading of this one, I understand that as well. Because they
Yeah.
said it as well. That was the question. So you have seen him? Like for real? Are you serious? You're
Yeah.
not even 50 years old yet.
Yeah.
But Jesus said, your father Abraham rejoiced to see my days. He saw it and he was glad. That means they meet each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
That seems something cool. Okay, yeah. So that means in the Old Testament. Oh, oh, wait. Do you remember when there were the three people who went to visit Abraham?
We're going there next. We're going not doing it right now. We're going there next because this links. This is the next thing we're going on to from this.
Okay, so okay, that's okay. I'm not gonna do any link.
We won't spoil it just yet. Remember, a magician doesn't reveal all his tricks, right?
Right, right. And then here Jesus told them that before Abraham he was there.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, before uh before everything, before even the beginning, like he was there. So
Yep. Yep.
yeah, that's clear as water. There is no need to change. That's what he says, and that's what's easier.
Yeah. And that's how John opens his gospel, by the way, in chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word has always been. There was never a time when the Word did not exist. So
Yeah.
before Abraham was, if I was to give you a very literal translation of what Jesus is saying there, what he's actually saying is, I am the eternal God, meaning I've always been. That's what he's saying. And that's why, look at their response in verse 29. So they picked up stones to throw at him. Why? Because he had just claimed to be the eternal God. He just claimed to be Jehovah before their eyes, right? Which for
Mm-hmm.
them was like, that's the highest form of blasphemy, to claim that name for yourself, the divine name of God, Yahweh, for yourself, which is what he had just done. But as you rightfully pointed out, right, he's telling them, I saw Abraham. Abraham saw me. He was glad that he saw my day. And then they're looking at him like, as he said, it's like, you're hardly 50 years old, dude. Because they know Abraham existed about 2,000 years before Jesus, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, 2,000. You're telling us you were there 2,000 years ago, and you want us to believe that? Like, really?
Yeah.
So obviously, it's a profound claim for Jesus to be making, but it can only be true if Jesus is in fact the eternal God, because that's the only way to make sense of it. Otherwise, you can't make sense of it. So, and now we're going to go to the one that you just mentioned, Genesis 18. So let's go there. You're getting ahead of me. Okay, let me stop.
Well, I didn't even know that we were meant to go in Genesis 18, but
Yeah.
that's
So what I'm
by reading.
Yeah, go
By
ahead.
reading the thing, that's what I got.
Yep.
Like when let's
But what's good about doing this is that because you and I, we're quite familiar with the Bible at this point because we've gone through it. Not everybody will be. So for us, this is good for them, for others, right, to point out to them like where these connections are, because sometimes some people sometimes they just stick to the Gospels and they don't really read the Old Testament much because they like just the comfort of staying in the Gospels. Now you're seeing the importance.
don't say that.
No, not everybody. Not everybody, but some people. But this is why I do this at times, to encourage people to go back, because this is where the connections are being made, right? Because if you have that context from the Old Testament, you can make a fuller sense of everything that's going on in these passages. Because if you haven't read Genesis, then you're just going to be reading this like, wait, what? Why is he? Who's this Abraham guy? What's he talking about? How does this connect in with everything? But if you do spend time in the Old Testament, which everybody should, it'll make more sense of what the gospel writers are saying, because again, they're constantly pulling from this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Genesis 18. So what I'll do is I'll read these couple of verses. So I'll read verse 1 to... I'll just read 1 to 13. Okay. And the Lord appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre as he sat at the door of his tent in the heat of the day. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing in front of him. When he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the earth and said, O Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree, while I bring a morsel of bread, that you may refresh yourselves, and after that you may pass on, since you have come to be your servant. So they said, Do as you have said. And Abraham went quickly into the tent to Sarah, and said, Quick, 3 seahs of fine flour, knead it, and make cakes. And Abraham ran to the herd, and took a calf, tender and good, and gave it to a young man, who prepared it quickly. Then he took curds and milk, and the calf that he had prepared, and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree while they ate. They said to him, Where is Sarah, your wife? And he said, She is in the tent. The Lord said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, shall have a son. And Sarah was listening at the tent door behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. The way of women had ceased to be with Sarah. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, After I have worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure? The Lord said to Abraham, Why did Sarah laugh and say, Shall I indeed bear a child, now that I am old? Okay. So... what are you getting from that now exactly? Now, just to obviously, we're contrasting this with the view that, let's say, so the Jewish people who just read the Tanakh, which is the Old Testament, will sit there and say, God never takes an anthropomorphic form. He never takes a humanoid form because, God is transcendent, right? He's just spirit, right? He's beyond time and space. Therefore, he can't take a form like this. However, when we're reading this, what do you get from it, babe?
If we connect the verse that we just read, right, in
Yeah.
John 8, was it?
Yeah.
We can see here, because then people may say that, at the beginning is the just say 3 visitors, right? But the more you read it, the more you know that wasn't just a simple visitor. That was the Lord. And Abraham, yeah, I was about to say Abraham. Abraham noticed that. That's why it was so, like, it was just like, if I find favor, like, because let's be honest, not all of us can have favor at the eyes of God. But when you take the time to see that, okay, that's God, you
Yeah.
actually start to analyzing what right word to use to talk with him when you're talking to him. Because then you go, if I find favor to you, please do not go on past your servant.
Yeah.
Already that showed that he was showing reverence to God. Because you will never run and see like just 3 men walking, even
Yeah.
if your sense of what is sense of hospitality so high. I don't think you will just run to three people like that. And the thing that while we were reading these, they said there were 3 men, but he said, "My Lord," right?
Yeah.
He didn't say my Lord.
Yeah.
He said my Lord. It was single. Like it was. I don't know if he said singular or plural,
Yeah.
but it was just a singular. To say that it was referring to one in particular, that's mean that God was there as well in the midst of the two. We don't know if the two were angels. Now we do know, cause then they've been sent to Sodom and Gomorrah. Like I don't want to go in advance. You only asked me to say here, so let
Because
me
we're going
just
to get to 19 soon after this. But even
let
okay,
me.
one thing I just want to quickly point out is that when we use the term angel, particularly in the Old Testament, right? Remember, angel just means messenger.
Mhm,
So in other words, God can actually come as a messenger, and therefore the title angel can be applied to him.
mhm,
Okay.
mhm,
So when we say, because sometimes when people hear the word angel, they just picture like cherubim, seraphim, those sort of
mhm,
things. But it doesn't strictly mean that. Angel can be applied to God, because we'll see later on that angel, what's called Yahweh Malek, which is the angel of the Lord, is in fact God Himself. So in other words, God comes and delivers a message, and that in turn makes Him a messenger. But He's still God, right? He's still the eternal God. So now, an interesting, just before you continue, like an interesting thing is that it's possible. I wouldn't strongly, what's the word for it? I wouldn't strongly enforce this rendering of it. But some people have insinuated that the three persons that appeared to Abraham was in fact the Father, the Son, and the Spirit, right? In some shape or form, right? There was a manifestation of God in His three persons appearing before Abraham. Whether that's the case or not, I don't know. But the safest possible, I think anyway, at least the safest possible rendering would just be, okay, it's Jesus and then two messengers alongside Him who are accompanying Him.
And then, when you finish serving them, like for me, what was a confirmation? Again, I'm not trying to convince somebody, but that
Yeah,
was a confirmation for me that's in that moment was God that was visiting,
yeah,
that was visiting Abraham. Because verse 10 say the Lord, but the way that is right, the Lord is different, is the way that usually we use it to refer to Lord God, you
yeah,
know
yeah,
which in this case could be Jesus.
yeah, yeah,
My mom just arrived. Could be Jesus, because no, could be because John 8 state that, specify that was
yeah.
Jesus,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
basically. So I'm convinced more now that is Jesus.
Yeah, yeah,
And then he didn't use just the Lord writing in that way once. He was writing more than once. He was writing verse 10, then we saw it again in verse 13. Then we saw it in verse 14. I don't know if you read all these verse, but yeah.
yeah. But it's even in the first
Mm.
verse, verse 1, seems to be in verse 3.
Oh
And then
yeah,
as
I
you
said the Lord appear. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Um,
Yep.
so yeah, like who is the Lord in that case? Well, the Lord is, as you and I both know, that's Yahweh Himself. That's God Himself, the eternal God. But when Abraham comes before this man, by the way, God in this context has what? He's taken the form of a man, right? He's taken this humanoid form right before Abraham, and then Abraham bows down and worships Him, right? Because he recognizes that's the eternal God. And on top of that, what's the other thing? They're eating. It says that which verse is it? It says where is it?
Said before he served them as they were under the tree.
Yeah, verse 8, right? And He stood by them under the tree while they ate. You picture that? The eternal God has taken a human form and He's there with Abraham and they're eating food together. So, like, the reason I point to that is because there's a verse in the Quran that this is how they try and deny the divinity of Jesus. They'll say, look, Mary and Jesus ate food. How can Jesus be God? What does eating food have to do with the divinity of Jesus? If God wants to, the unlimited God can take a human form, eat food, and still remain God. Who says that He can't?
Mm.
You know?
I am what I am. That's it. It doesn't say
Exactly.
I am. I am what you think I am.
Exactly. I am
I
that
say
I am.
I am that I am. You say I am that I am. I say I am what I am.
Yeah, exactly. So I am that I am, as
Yeah.
you rightfully pointed out, Dave, is that like when it
So
comes
that's mean you can't put God in a certain form or shape that you have. That's
yeah,
that's also that's also like, if we take a minute to consider, I think is kind of a blessing, because we don't know how God look like. So it seemed to me, when some people want to focus only on the physical side of God, to
yes,
blame or to start saying stuff that they are not meant to be saying, I
yeah,
just look at them like, you don't even know what you're talking about. Have you ever seen God?
yeah,
Like, God can take any shape because He's God.
yeah,
The name say God. It doesn't say your friend. It
yeah,
doesn't say Adam. It doesn't say my name. It doesn't say a bag. It say God. You
yeah,
know. So I think it's kind of a blessing because we have that, I don't want to say ignorance, but we don't have a knowledge of the shape the actual shape of God. So we
Yeah,
don't have like to imaginate him. And that's common as well with the verse that say, bless those that they did not see but they believe, right?
yeah, yeah,
Oh, mama. So that's that's the thing as well. So when people are just there like fighting about, oh, God looked like this, or God is black, or God is I generally I do not care.
yeah,
I never seen God, and all I care is to have the heart of God, keep serving him
yeah,
without trying, because how mind, like, every time there is something that really blow up my mind, is just like our mind is so little that trying to confine God in this little mind
yeah.
is just so is I don't want to use the word stupid, but it seems like it's really stupid.
No, no, like it is. It's counter. It's
It makes
counter.
no sense.
Because that's what they see. This is the thing, right? That's what they do in Islam, right? They intellectualize God. They put God into a box and they say, God has to be this, this, and this. And if he's not this and this and this, then he can't be God. Totally ignorant of the fact that God is whoever he defines himself to be. When God says, I am that I am, it means that God is whatever he reveals himself to be to us, and we just have to accept it, right? God has always been the way that he is, right? Whether we like it or not, he's the eternal God. He's above creation. His ways are not our ways. His understanding is not our understanding. All this stuff. But when you try and pull God down and intellectualize him, you're just totally going against the concept of God. Like God, in some sense, there's aspects of his existence that are supposed to be mysterious, that are
And then
supposed to.
that's also, sorry for interrupting you, but that
Um,
will also bring me back to the point where because our mind always try to put God in some type, like, some shape or whatever.
yeah,
That's what brought Exodus in the book of Exodus, the Israelite, to scarf God in, like, in some form or shape, because we always tend to want to put God in some type of shape that we want it to
yeah,
look like. Okay, God looked like this way, or he looked like that way.
yeah,
Like, as far as I know, I never seen the face of God. I don't think I'm gonna see the face of God until I die. But I can feel his presence. I know that, oh, he's here, oh, he's talking to me, oh, he's doing that. So I don't really like, I am not curious to be like debating with somebody saying that, oh, he look like this, or he look like that. That
yeah,
doesn't even concern me. Because
yeah,
I believe, although I didn't see, if he want to reveal himself to me, he will. If he doesn't want to, I'm fine with it. I'm
yeah.
not begging for that, because there is more important. Like, there is, I'm just like, some days I sit here and I'm just like, God, I'm so grateful that you don't have our little mind. Because
Yeah,
if he had our little mind, we will be confined in a box, all of us, like a small box like this, because our mind is really, really, really small.
yeah.
My own as well. I'm not saying like specific category of people. My own as well. I start with me like every time. So that's 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 all I had to add.
Yeah, because like again, just building on what you were saying as well. Like when Matthew says in Matthew 16, right, when Jesus or when Peter confesses Jesus be the Christ, he says, Jesus responds, "This was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father who is in heaven." Right.
Hmm.
So again, if you sit there and you're trying to understand everything intellectually without actually allowing God to explain things to you, then how are you going to expect to understand things properly? Like God is both simple and complex, right?
Hmm.
Simple in the sense that God has made himself understandable to us, right?
Sorry.
Which is
Hmm.
through the logos, right? But also complex in the sense that there's aspects of God's existence that we'll never truly understand or fathom, right? We just know that God is this particular way, but we don't understand exactly what it means. So one of the examples I give is when we talk about omnipresence. Um, we have a term to define the fact that God can be present in more than one place simultaneously, right? However, what does that actually mean? I don't know, because I've never experienced it, and I never will experience it, because that's something unique to God. So there's a limitation to what we can understand. We have to accept that. We have to accept that limitation, and just be reliant God's self-disclosure, how God reveals himself, and listening to God and hearing his voice, and trying to really, really reflect and meditate on everything that he tells us honestly, like in an honest way. Okay, so we're now going to go to Genesis 19. Okay. It's titled God Destroys Sodom. So we're going to do verse... like, that's a hilarious title. Okay, so verse 24. Do you want to read it, or will I read it? Okay, I'll read it. So here it says, this is verse 24. Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. The Lord, so like then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. So you have the Lord on earth, which is the Lord that has appeared to Abraham, who we're assuming is Jesus, right? Raining down sulfur and fire upon Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord who is in heaven. That's two lords. And on top of that, like when we check this in the Hebrew, it says Yahweh rains down sulfur and fire from Yahweh in heaven. So you've got two Yahwehs, or two lords, right? Now, it's the one God, because it's the God is the one that's doing it, but he has manifested himself in two persons, right? You have the person of the angel of the Lord, right, who's obviously, as we know from the New Testament, is the Son, the eternal Son, raining down from Yahweh in heaven, right, which is the Father, we have to assume. So yeah, like this is again, I don't know how even Jews deal with a passage like this, because if you look at the Midrash, which is the rabbinic interpretation of these particular verses, this is a problematic verse even for Jews to try and make sense of, because it indicates that God is not strictly Unitarian, which is very, very problematic. So yeah, do you have anything else you want to add, babe? Okay. Did that make sense? Okay. Let's go to... Okay, perfect. Let's go to the next one then. So we did 19. We did 17. And now we're going to go on to 12. We're almost finished. We have about 10 minutes left, and then we'll finish up. Well, we can go a little longer. I don't mind. Okay. We'll just do 10 more minutes then. Let me share my screen here. This one's a big one. So verse 40 and 41. Okay. All right. I'm assuming, will I read this? Yeah. Okay. So this is verse 40 and 41. I just want people to take a note of what Jesus is getting at here. So verse 40. He has blinded their eyes and hardened their heart, lest they see with their eyes and understand with their heart and turn, and I would heal them. Now it says then, verse 41, following on from that, Isaiah said these things because he saw his glory and spoke of him. Now the question is these verses, what's being quoted here? So verse 40, right? That's him quoting Isaiah chapter 6. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want you, babe, if you could read for us. Oh, sorry. I went to the wrong one. If you can read for us verse 1, please.
Of what?
Actually, verse 1 to 3 of Isaiah chapter 6.
Yeah.
Isaiah chapter 6, verse 1 to 3.
1 minute, Isaiah. Isaiah, you say Isaiah
Chapter 6, verses
6,
1 to
okay.
3.
6. 1 minute, okay.
Yeah, no worries.
So, are you sure? Isaiah 6.
Isaiah chapter 6, verses 1 to 3.
In the year that King Uzziah died, I
Yeah,
saw the Lord seated on a high and lofty throne, and the hem of his robe filled the temple.
yeah. So,
Seraphim
yeah,
were standing above him. They each had 6 wings. With two, they covered their faces. With two, they covered their feet. And with two, they flew. And one called to another. Shall I keep going?
is that verse 3? Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Oh, shall I? Yeah.
yeah.
Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of the army.
Uh huh, uh huh.
His glory filled the whole earth. The foundation of the doorways shook at the sound of their voice, and the temple was filled with smoke. Then I said, woe is me, for I am ruined, because I am a man of unclean lip, and live among a people of unclean lips, and because my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of armies. And because my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of armies.
Yeah.
What?
Okay. So before we go on to the next part in Isaiah, right? What is what this temple vision, right? Who is Isaiah seeing in it?
God
Yeah, and where is God?
sitting on his throne
Yeah, and what's going on? What's happening around God on his throne?
is being worshipped
Hmm.
by the seraphim.
Okay. Exactly, right. So that's what Isaiah is seeing, right? He's seeing God in this position of exaltation, being worshipped by the
Mhm,
angels, right? Who are circling him, right?
mhm.
And notice how their faces are covered as well, because he's so holy, right? And then that's when they say in verse 3, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, right? Now,
But I think that holy is no indication of the Trinity.
yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure exactly. It could be, it may not be. But the point is that with the one that's on the throne, he's holy, right? They're making that clear that he is holy. This is the holy, perfect, righteous God, right? The glorious, magnificent, perfect God. And that's the vision that Isaiah sees. Now, in okay, so read verse 10 to 11, please, in Isaiah chapter 6. Now, you don't have to read 11,
Make the minds of hmm?
just 10. You don't have to read 11.
Okay. Make the mind of these people dull, deafen the ear and blind their eyes.
Yeah,
Otherwise they may see with their eyes and hear with their ears, understand with their mind, turn back and be healed.
okay. Now, John chapter 12, verse 40, as you can see, he's quoting Isaiah chapter 6, verse 10.
Mhm.
Then in 41, he says something very profound. He said, Isaiah said these things because he saw his glory and he spoke of him. Some translations will say that he said these things because he'd seen the glory of Jesus and spoke about him.
Mm, mm,
Now, if verse 40 is taken from Isaiah chapter 6, and we're told here
mhm,
that Isaiah saw the glory of Jesus, then
mhm.
who did Isaiah see seated upon the throne being worshipped by the angels, according to John?
Jesus.
Yeah, that's John's point. That's the point that he's making, because he's taking this from Isaiah. Remember, he's taking this section from Isaiah chapter 6, right? And he's applying it to Jesus. And then he says Isaiah saw the glory of Jesus. So if he saw the glory of Jesus, then who was the glorious one that he saw seated upon the throne that was being worshipped by the angels?
Jesus.
Yeah, that's John's
Mm.
point. Which is like, again, if anyone wants to know, this again, did Isaiah encounter Jesus? Well, Isaiah saw Jesus seated upon his throne. And then this is the one that in verse 7, verse 9, verse 42, verse 14, or sorry, when I say verse, I mean chapter, sorry. Chapter 7, chapter 9, chapter 42, chapter 49, chapter 53. All those chapters about Emmanuel, the suffering servant, right? He's applying it to the one that he's seeing in front of him, because that's the one who he's seeing will come and redeem his people. That's why in Isaiah, if I'm not mistaken, you know, one of the names of Jesus that's given to him in Isaiah chapter 9, I think it is. It's either 9 or 7, is he's called the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace, the King of Kings, God Almighty, El Gabor in the Hebrew. He's given all these titles, and then another name that he's given is Emmanuel, which is God with us.
Yeah.
So that's what Isaiah is seeing. That's the vision that he's having. And then that's why John tells us Isaiah saw the glory of Jesus and then spoke about him. So who is he speaking about? All these prophecies in his book. It was all about Jesus, right? Yeah. Okay. We have time for one last one. Okay. So what we'll do as the last one, this one will take too long. So we're just going to go to Matthew 22. This one, I love this one. This is Matthew 22. Okay. Share screen. Matthew 22. Okay. Can you read for me, please, babe, verses 41 to 46? We're going to finish with this. This will be the last one, and then we're done. I can't hear.
Which one is this one? Matthew?
Sorry, Matthew 22, verses 41 to 46. This will be the last one, and then we're done.
Matthew 22.
22, verses 41 to 46.
41
I have it on
to
the screen as well.
Because I can't see the screen. It's too small. I'm using my phone.
Okay, no worries, no
While
worries.
the Pharisees were together, Jesus questioned them, "What do you think about the Messiah? Whom son he is?" They replied, "David's." He asked them, "How is it then that David, inspired by the Spirit, called him Lord? The Lord declared to my Lord, 'Sit at my right hand until I put your enemy under your feet.'" Again.
Mhm.
If David calls him Lord, how then can he be his son? No one was able to answer him at all. And from that day, no one dared to question him anymore.
I love that ending. It's like no one dared to ask him another question. So what are you getting from that, babe? Tell me.
What do I get from that?
Mm-hmm.
Inspired by the Holy Spirit. If you say that it's Son of Man, um, or if to say that, oh, um, it depends as well, because I don't think that I'm getting something correct here, but what I'm getting from this one is just like they only know that the Messiah was supposed to come from the descendants of David, the
Yeah.
Pharisees.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And then he rebukes them, and what does he tell them?
What do you mean?
So you're completely right, okay? The first question that Jesus asks them, right, is the Messiah or the Christ, whose son is he? And
Mm,
then they respond with exactly with what you said, right? The son of David.
mm,
So again,
yeah.
the assumption here is that the Christ is to come from the line of David. Okay, fair enough.
Mm-hmm,
There is prophecy in the Old Testament that he'll be of the line of David. Okay, that's
mm-hmm,
fine. But Jesus takes it much further than that. So what does he say in verse 43 and 44?
mm. The Lord declared to my Lord, sit
Mm-hmm.
at my right hand until I put your enemy under your feet.
And then verse 45.
If David called him Lord, how then can he be his son?
Okay. Now what's Jesus's point here?
That is not the son of David, although he was from the descendants of David.
Okay. Okay. And why is it pointless calling him the son of David? What is he actually? Because this is what he's telling them.
Say that again, sorry.
So you're totally right.
Oh, sugar.
Okay. So we
Mm.
know that he's to come from the line of David. Fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not the son of David in the sense that they think, right? Uh,
Yeah, he's not, of course, he's not the son of David in the, because, okay, all right. For my own understanding, because they were expecting for somebody royal,
yeah,
all right, as well,
yeah,
except for the fact that he was supposed to come from the descendant of David. They
yeah,
were also waiting for somebody who was from the royal, like, were living like a king,
yeah,
which was, like, I'm not saying that Jesus Christ did not have a royal descendants, which he had,
yeah, yeah,
but because of the way that he was living, they would never put give Jesus that position of Messiah,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
And then also he said, how come by the Spirit, inspired by the Spirit? So technically, when David say, the Lord declared to my Lord is talking about the
Well,
Spirit of God that he had in him, no?
so the Lord said to my Lord. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So now the answer to your question,
Sit on
babe,
my right hand.
is verse 45. Who's the him in that he's calling Lord?
Jesus,
Yeah, exactly. Now,
the Lord declared to my Lord.
if David called Jesus Lord, what does that mean? Does that mean David encountered Jesus?
It could be, but here Jesus said that he was inspired by the Spirit.
Mm-hmm. Calls him Lord, saying, because we're talking about an encounter that David has, right? Through the Spirit, right? Whether it's a vision or whatever it is, because this is taken from Psalm 110.
Mm.
Okay, so what does he see? He has a vision of the Lord speaking to my Lord, and then he says,
Jesus at the right hand.
at the right hand, exactly. And then he says, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet. Who's at the right hand of
Mm-mm.
the Father?
Jesus is at the right hand of the Father.
So who is the one that David encounters here in this vision, let's just say?
Jesus.
Uh-huh. And that's the my Lord, right? So if David
Mm-hmm.
called Jesus my Lord,
The Lord
then
declared to my Lord.
yeah,
Oh, okay. Because it said calls him calls him Lord.
yes.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
if David called the
He does
Christ,
calls him Lord. How then he can be son?
Exactly, because the overarching point here is that Jesus is the Lord, right? Meaning he was the creator. He created David. So he's not his son in the sense that they're saying it. It's almost something similar to if you were to look at something like the situation with Mary, right? It's like at the end of the day, Jesus created Mary. So to have any level of exaltation of a human being to any level is sort of frivolous in the sense that at the end of the day, she's a creation of Jesus. So that the title of Mother of God shouldn't be taken beyond a certain point, right? It should only be to a certain point and no further, because at the end of the day, she was created by him, because all things were created through him and by him, which we know from Colossians chapter 1 and John chapter 1. But here, as you just saw, babe, verse 45, right? David called the Messiah Lord. So how can he be his son? And we know that the Messiah is Jesus. So the implication here, according to Matthew, is that David recognized the lordship of Christ. And the only way that can be is, the way we saw in chapter 17, he encounters Moses. Same thing. He encountered David, and then from John, he encountered Abraham. The whole overarching point is he's there. He's there in the Old Testament. He's encountering all the prophets in some shape or form. So, yeah. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, let me just quickly stop sharing. Okay, babe. Any closing remarks?
No. I don't have any closing. Yeah, for my side, anyways, everything.
And what do you think? Do you think it was helpful? It was beneficial?
I hope it's gonna be beneficial for the people, because, yeah, from something that, okay, I had the question about that you try to explain a little bit. Well, that was like helpful for me, but most of all, like, my desire is that most people take the time actually to watch the video and then understand what's going on and stuff like this. Yeah.
Same. I just hope it's useful, that it can glorify God in some shape or form through whoever watches it and receives whatever it is that was spoken through the scripture to them. So yeah. Thank you so much for joining us, Momo. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you. You were a phenomenal guest, and you brought great insight, great wisdom, great revelation to the people watching, and it was a blessing having you on.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Okay.
So bye
Everybody. God bless and have a good night.
and leave.